Okay, here we are. And as folks are coming in, hey everyone, we are so excited you're here live with us today. I was just telling Janelle I saw her slide deck for today, and I am so incredibly excited. It's going to be an amazing session. As we're getting started, you know the drill. If you wouldn't mind checking that chat box, saying hello, make sure your chat is turned to everyone. I am the worst of always saying that, and then it being still stuck with two panelists and attendees. So yeah, make sure your chat is to everyone. We're so excited here. Tell us where you're coming from. Janelle, where do you live?
I am in the Dallas-Fort Worth, Texas area.
I should have just driven up for this.
Okay, next time.
Yeah, absolutely. What part of DFW?
Fort Worth area specifically, a little more towards
Awesome.
Crowley, Burleson.
We could have done this in Chimmy's.
Next time, we're going to have to do it again.
Done, everyone. This is it. You've heard it here first. You will find us at a margarita bar for the next session, eating nachos and talking all thing marketing. I love it. I just moved out from there, so I'm out 5 hours west in Lubbock. So I mean, not too far in Texas time. So, but love to see we got ATL folks, Minnesota. I know many of you. Yes, Nashville, Seattle. So excited you're here. You're probably having much better weather, and it's probably feeling like spring already. Other than like the 30-degree weather that we have here. So, well, awesome. We are so excited you're here. This is going to be such a great session. Like I said, I was looking at the slide deck and everything, and I was just like, oh my gosh, this is going to be outstanding and so incredibly helpful. So make sure you've got something that you can write with ready to go. As always, this will be recorded. If you have to drop halfway through, no worries. I will be posting this in the community probably this afternoon or first thing in the morning. If you have any questions, there's a little box at the bottom of the screen that says Q&As. You can drop your questions in there. You can drop them in the chat. You can DM me. You can DM me on Slack, whatever you're most comfortable with. Send me those questions and we'll get them answered. Today, we'll be answering them throughout the conversation, so you don't have to wait till the end. And I think that's about it. Janelle, I'll let you take over from here if you want to start showing your screen.
Cool, let's do it. So you guys should be able to... Actually, I lied. Don't you guys love it when stuff like this happens? I can roll with this one. You're going to see me on my second screen then. So just don't mind any of my head nods as we pull up the second screen. But you know what? Such is life, we'll make it work. Here we go. Alrighty. So I'm really excited for today's conversation. As you guys know, we're going to be talking about building a demand gen plan that is aligned with revenue. And I think that is like really phenomenal. Just in general, I nerd out over it on like a daily basis. And so the reason why I'm so excited is I'm the founder of a company called Elevate Growth, which is a demand gen and go-to-market consulting firm. And so I partner specifically with some B2B SaaS companies to help them really catapult and elevate their growth for their marketing and demand gen programs. So pun intended. Before we start today's conversation with really getting like super nitty gritty and into the weeds and marketing, I want to kind of like take our marketing hats off and think about something in a third party world and think about something totally different than marketing. Let's talk about baking. Let's talk about if we were just wanting to craft a cake, if we decided to go into our kitchen today and bake a cake, and we decided that we just didn't want to put any of the 3 key ingredients into our cake, do you think that it'll turn out the same? If we forgot eggs, if we forgot milk, if we forgot flour.
As someone who has swapped the salt and the sugar before, I can tell you it does not come out the same way.
Should it? So, what would happen if we forgot some of those key ingredients? And one of the things that, when we think about baking a cake, is you start with the ingredients. You start with the ingredients, you figure out what you have. If you have the ingredients, you figure out how much of those ingredients that you need in order to be successful for building your cake. So when it comes to marketing and when it comes to building our demand gen plan, it's the same thing. If we really like extract our marketing hats out of it, we're really talking about like looking at the cards that are in front of us and dealing with those specific situations and those specific ingredients. So this is what happens when marketers skip that step and they decide that they want to bake the cake first and then guess what ingredients were put in it. Katie, to your point, maybe it was salt instead of sugar or sugar instead of salt, whatever. So what happens is you get cakes that were supposed to be pretty, but they ended up burnt. You get cakes that were supposed to be nicely frosted, but we forgot the frosting. You get cakes that were supposed to be circular, but ended up rectangular. Like it's a case of misaligned expectations. It's the case of not understanding the right ingredients up front. It's the case of just trying to rush results. So before we deep dive into today's conversation, why should you even take anything that I say for consideration? So one of the things that I pride myself in over the years is having helped over 14 companies in the last 5 years successfully develop and deploy revenue generating demand gen plans. And towards the end of this presentation, we're actually going to see some of like Salesforce screenshots of some of the pipeline growth over time with some of the plans that we're going to walk through today with sample data. So I do have some NDAs. So some of the things, are going to be anonymized or, blacked out. But if you guys can work through that and really look at like the core foundational, the ingredients of what's going to make this presentation and this demand gen successful, it's going to be coming back into rolling up our sleeves and understanding what those key ingredients are first that we need to look at first before we can actually start building into a demand gen plan. So now we can put our marketing hats back on, right? From here, we need to think about when we want to build an effective demand gen plan, what does that look like? What are those key ingredients, First and foremost, we have to figure out what our product market fit are, right? We have to figure out what the product is even designed to do. We have to understand the pain points and the problems that it's going to be solving for our audience. We also have to understand if there's an audience. We have to understand our TAM, our total addressable market. We have to understand our ICP. We have to understand the percentage of the ICP in comparison to the TAM. Right? So a TAM is understanding anybody in the entire world who could potentially once buy from you. And the ICP is saying, okay, of those people who could potentially once upon a time buy from you, which ones actually are realistic? Normally it's not 100%, right? So before we even get started, we have to know what's realistic. We can't just start throwing spaghetti at a wall. We have to start with our ICP. We have to start with product market fit. Then we also have to start with research. We have to understand if you have existing customers right now, what made them buy? What current problems and solutions are you helping them in their day-to-day lives? And we have to know that from a marketing perspective before anything we do with marketing is really going to make sense, or else, again, we're just throwing spaghetti at the wall. We also have to understand our business objectives. This goes back to, are we baking a circular cake or are we baking a rectangular cake, right? Like we have to understand what we're measured against, what the end outcome is that everybody wants. Do we want a chocolate cake? Do we want a vanilla cake? Do we want a confetti cake? We all have to understand what that business objective is. I call this our North Star. Even for demand gen, for marketing, for business leaders, you have to have a North Star that everybody, all the go-to-market teams have to be working towards. And as marketers and demand gen marketers, we have to know that too. We also have to know, KPIs. What are we going to be held accountable for? Are we going to be held accountable for how pretty that cake tastes? Are we going to be held accountable to how pretty it looks? How, wonderful the colors are going to be mixed together? Like all of that comes into consideration. Maybe it's all of it. Maybe it's one of it. So really having that KPI, really understanding what's going to help you be successful to measure towards. And there was something I saw on LinkedIn, which the name of who posted is actually slipping my mind at the moment, but they said, if you give your team a KPI, it'll get met. So you need to make sure that it's the right KPI. If you want them to hit a different one, but you're giving them a entirely different KPI, you're going to be hitting the wrong one. So KPIs are met, but you need to make sure it's the right one. So identifying what that is up front and having those conversations of if they're even the right one to begin with is going to be critical for us to all align to the plan that we put together in conjunction with what's expected of us. We also have to identify, budget and channel strategies and the specifics and the overarching demand gen strategy. But I think another thing that's oftentimes overlooked are resources. We also have to look at what are the cards that we're dealt with first. What can we make happen first? And then from there, we have to say, do we need third-party help? Should we even consider that right now? Or is that a year 2 type of program? So those are some of the things when we think about building an effective demand gen plan, what that looks like. So here's my 3-step framework for creating those ingredients and picking those up from scratch and really reverse engineering all of this stuff to create a demand gen plan that is aligned with KPIs, aligned with stakeholders' expectations, and ultimately increases the bottom line, which is revenue. The first one here is understand what matters, which we'll dive into each of these individually too. The second one is formulate a plan. And the third one is conquer the market. Now, in this order, it doesn't really sound like we're reverse engineering, right? You would think conquer the market would go first, and then, you start forward and go backwards. But as we deep dive into number one of understand what matters, you'll see what we're reverse engineering and why that's the number one point. So step one, understand what matters. And this is, we're about to get in the weeds right now. So if you don't have your notebooks, your papers, your pens, your questions ready, here we go. So the first step for us to understand, this goes back to the list of the ingredients. What matters? Here are some of the things that we need to think about. Let's determine important business metrics. Let's determine marketing advertising budget. That's going to be different than a marketing investment as a whole because you have salaries, you have tech stack, right? So we have to understand from an advertising perspective what we have to work with. You have to look at what your tech stack capabilities are. Do you have HubSpot marketing automation and sales CRM? Do you have HubSpot? Do you have Salesforce as a CRM? Do you have Marketo? Not that it really matters, right? Some have capabilities and limitations. All of them, there is no right best answer on what tech stack you should have, but it matters, right? If you need to drill down into reporting, do you have your resources to help you with that? Do you have an ops person? Do you know how to do that, right? HubSpot is a little more marketing friendly than Salesforce is. So we need to understand what those capabilities are from that tech stack perspective. Again, going back to resources, stakeholders, some of the things I like to, specifically call out here are the business metrics of ARR, ACV, churn rate, and growth rate. Those are going to be the foundational components to ensure alignment. Next, we have to identify the KPIs that marketing is going to be held accountable for, right? We have to then identify the key pain points of the existing campaign strategy. So someone like myself, who's third party working with internal marketing teams, what's worked before in the past? Why are you seeking my help, right? Maybe this is just, right channel, wrong strategy. Maybe it's a wrong channel entirely for the audience that you're going after. So we have to understand really what has worked before, what hasn't, and why. And then the next thing that we get to understand from there is how that company actually wants to be perceived in the market. We also need to better understand their top competitors. We need to understand who their best customers are and why. This all helps with positioning, alignment, and messaging, and it's critical for us to know up front. So that all sounds great, right? How do you get these answers? Normally, I like to spend individual interviews with at least one of each of the following departments: the head of marketing, the head of sales and or BDR. Sometimes there's one person, sometimes there's two, and at least 1 to 3 customers, depending on the complexity of the product and what the company is willing to give you access to for the customers. So if you have one enterprise product suite where it's one product suite, it's a bundle and it is what it is, maybe to start, 1 customer is enough. If you have 3 different product offerings and any customer could have a totally different journey based on whatever product that they have and the pain point that they're solving, you probably need to talk to one of each, right? So that goes down to understanding your level of product complexity and your audience. So what does this mean tactically? When we talk about determining business metrics and, measuring KPIs and discovering pain points, here are just some sample numbers of like the numbers that we're going to be using to build this demand gen plan. Say, for example, the budget for marketing is 1.1 million. The ARR targets for 2023 and 7 million. The sales cycle is currently at 4 months. They have an 8% churn rate. They have a 40% growth rate. And in terms of resources, right now they have 3 marketing people, 5 AEs, 3 BDRs. And they actually have 1 in-house video editor, but he's currently doing like support videos. And he wants to be doing a little bit more than just that. For what measures success for KPIs, marketing right now is being held accountable to SQLs, which are sales qualified leads. Sales is currently being measured on pipeline that is closed. When we talk about some of the key pain points for the existing campaign strategy of what worked and what hasn't worked and why, some of the things that we found out when we did our interviews, we're going to assume that we went ahead and did those, is that they changed their audience focus. They pivoted from who they were targeting before, right? So they don't really have a full clear path forward on who they should be targeting and why. The programs that they've run have historically been tied to MQL generation, and they struggle to get that conversion rate from an MQL to SQL, which sounds like a really big problem if marketing is measured on SQLs, right? So that also tells me that they have a quality issue if they have a really low conversion rate between the two. What I discovered in some of the interviews and the research process is that they have an account list inside of Salesforce with the right companies, but terrible wrong contacts. And so if the conversation is that, hey, these account lists match the new direction that we want to go for our audience, this could be really low hanging fruit to start with targeting. right? Like we could start here and like just source new contacts and figure out who the right ones are that we're going after and use that to then create lookalike lists. And if you have tech stack like 6sense, you can create your additional accounts that look like that. That's why tech stack is important. You have to figure out what you have available to you to now take the little breadcrumb that you're seeing and just blow that up, right? Like where can we start and where can we go? That's why I like to start with the fundamentals. From there, we also learned that there's no real investment in generating demand, or some common term you guys will hear in the industry is called create demand. Another one is that they're solely focused on converting existing in-market demand. What we also discovered is that campaigns are not currently integrated. Each channel kind of has their own person running it, and they're kind of just doing their own little journey individually, and nothing is really rolling into a larger holistic marketing journey. We also learned that the company is still relatively new, 7 million, they're a high growth startup. So there's definitely a huge opportunity for brand awareness and market share. But we also learned that there's two very large known competitors in the industry that have about 2 times the market share with them. So when we ask about how they want to be perceived in the market and where they want to go, they want to be positioned as market leaders, but with the understanding that they have competitors that are bigger than them, but they want to go in and say that we do it better. Okay, so now we have understanding on what we're measured on, the business goals, right? How we want to go in for positioning and messaging, and where to start from integrating campaigns. Now we also know a little piece of breadcrumb of that account list in Salesforce. We're not even halfway there yet. Okay, so here we go into deep diving what all this looks like from a tactical perspective. All of this sounds great, just theoretically, but this is what I actually used for some of my clients. And so again, take your questions out. I don't know, Katie, if you want me to pause at any point, just interrupt me. When we start talking about what this all means when we want to bring things to life, I like to take a look at where we've been pacing before. Obviously, we're going to have a change in strategy, so some things may not entirely connect, but we still have to map it out. I'm a visual person. I'm a spreadsheet person. So I have to sit and map this out. So you can see what I've mapped out here is 2021 close one revenue, 2022 close one revenue, 2023 goal is what we identified. We identified the growth rate, the sales cycle, the churn, and the ACV. At a minimum, that's what we know. Now I'll roll up my sleeves and I'll go into whether it's HubSpot or Salesforce or whatever port they have that their sales CRM, and I'll manually say, okay, here's what I heard. Now let's see what the data tells me. Let's see, are we actually aligned? This is important, actually. I'll derail here for a second for a story time. I had a company who wanted to have a 75% growth rate, but realistically, in the last years, they've only closed 12 accounts total as an entire company. And then now for the year that we were working together, they wanted marketing in and of itself to close 13. It almost seems like an unrealistic target when we talk about a change of audience, a change of direction, a whole new team, marketing leader, you're starting from scratch, and your sales cycle is 9 months. It's probably unrealistic. We're going to close 13 accounts in this year. So this is why this is important, why I nerd out over these specific numbers. So from here, again, rolling up my sleeves, deep diving into the CRMs, I'll pull the specific number of counts that are for closed one. I calculate how many of those will actually churn based on the close rate, or the churn rate that we learned. And then we can forecast and work backwards to that closed one revenue. And then what I actually like to add here in my own spreadsheets is that recommended marketing budget, is that recommended marketing investment, right? And so a lot of times you have companies who say the 2023 ARR goal needs to be 7 million, but marketing only gets 200K. Sometimes that's unrealistic when the numbers are telling us we need 50% more. Not that you always need a really big marketing budget, but it just helps you come back if you need to have that argument, if you need to have those statistics and numbers behind you, calculating it, reverse engineering it backwards and say, listen, industry best practice, is about this percent. So we should probably consider as we grow, we'll take what you give me now, but as we grow, let's consider upping it if marketing can realign to the revenue expectations.
Hey, Janelle, quick question for you. So what about first-time leaders and managers who are now, thrown into the budget process? What would you recommend for best practices whenever it's figuring out how much budget they should have, how much should they request? I always think of always request a little bit more because they're probably going to negotiate you backwards. How do you figure out what is industry standard and what that process looks like?
Great question. I think from what I've seen, industry standard from an investment for a marketing perspective is really anywhere between about 15 to 30%. Is that fair? Is that what you should be doing? Not necessarily. I think it goes down to what you guys have been investing for prior. You should look at what you've invested for prior. If you agree with that investment and how much more you want to forecast to add. Again, if they've only been doing the converting demand section of it and you need money for awareness, you need to either turn something off to swap, or you need to ask for more money, and you need to create what that strategy is ahead of time for you to physically look at what that amount is to ask for it. And then Katie, to your point, always cushion with a buffer for not only that they're going to negotiate you backwards, but also for testing. Especially if you're a new marketing leader, you're not going to know what works right out the jump. If you're changing audiences, if you're coming in and there's a lot of fires you need to put out, sometimes the extra budget is going to be useful. Hope that it helps answer the question.
Absolutely. Thank you. Oh, wait, here we go. I've got another question. Thank you for slacking that to me. What about at what point to recommend the investment split by channel? Paid social.
We'll get there.
Okay.
We'll get there. Yeah. That's my next spreadsheet. We'll get there.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. And so from here, one of the things that to go back on kind of answering that question about the number of investments, the percentage for best practice, is also understanding that you don't always need more money to make a larger impact. And especially, marketers right now are being faced with proving efficiency and really either getting their budgets pulled back or really having a specific number and really finding a way to make it grow. I'm going to show you 3 different examples of a spreadsheet, not increasing any investment, to show how we can make it better by following this process of the 1, 2, 3. Okay. So we'll get there. That's the next spreadsheet as well. So deep diving into the recommended marketing investment, we can also calculate the win rate over time. This is going to be important, where if a new marketing leader comes in and says, hey, best practice for a win rate should minimum be 20%, probably around 40%. And then we also need to say, like, if we're at 13, if we're at 8%, we probably need to focus on finishing something right now to up that very, very quickly, so that marketing can also start sourcing some good quality, high intent QLs for the company, and then also get them at a winning rate as well. So just to kind of regroup on some of this. So I'll map out 2021, 2022, and 2023. So you can see kind of where that recommended marketing investment is. And then what I took here is just 20% of that revenue target. But realistically, a lot of companies don't really like giving marketing a 20% budget. They like giving marketing about a 15% budget. So I just went ahead and did the calculation for the recommended marketing investment right now is going to be at 1.1, right? We can also see that if we break down the 30% that marketing should be responsible for revenue, it's only 2.1. So 7 million might look like a very scary target, but that's a business objective. That's not marketing's objective, right? Could marketing source all of that? 1000%, we could probably get there, right? But if we're starting from scratch, each go-to-market team should be held accountable to revenue. Marketing normally starts at about 30%. We want that to grow probably to about 60%. But at a minimum, if we're just getting started, a good North Star to have for what marketing should be accountable for revenue is about 30%. So with that, hopping back into this deck, why is this all important, and what does it mean, and why does it matter? So from here, this is where we're going to get to the nitty-gritty of the specific channel strategies. The example that we're going to be taking for this demand gen plan is this company, say, for example, that they are a sales compensation company where they run gamifications for sales compensation. So that's definitely more on like a quarterly basis, right? On how sales can figure out ways to be competitive and to get their quota met. So when we talk about that audience, you're definitely targeting AEs, you're targeting XDRs, you're targeting CROs, VP of sales, very sales oriented, right? We're also servicing companies that are more than about 50 reps. So by doing that customer research, assume that we had gone through the process and we did that customer research, what we learned based on our audience is that sales reps they're really hard to get the attention of. They're busy, right? Like they've got quota they need to meet, month ends, quarter ends, they got all those things. So they're busy, they get it, they're in the grinds and the weeds too. But because it's sales reps to sales rep at the point of actually getting an opportunity and talking to them, they're actually a pretty easy buy. They get it. They want somebody to be able to meet quota. And if they really true find value in the product, like they can get sold really easily. So from here, we also learned that the majority of the use cases for this audience is their tech stack is Salesforce plus Slack for the current communications and incentives. However, we also learned that the reason that most of them don't buy is because implementation can take time, right? As I mentioned, it's based on a quarterly outcome and quarterly compensations. So sometimes they have to wait 3 months in order to really just see the implementation, much less any ROI. And we all know that sales reps aren't always that patient. So they also have the fear of lack of adoption too, right? Like sales reps are busy, and like they're already incorporated in Salesforce and Slack. Why integrate another tool and have them stop and change their workflows when their efficiency could be focused on actually closing business? What we learned about why they do buy is that they are interested in increasing team morale. That's important as a KPI for the company. They also need to boost KPIs of pipeline generated, pipeline closed. And they ultimately, right, if they can boost those KPIs, they drive more revenue for the business. So this is important when you talk to CROs and VP of sales, where their whole pain point is getting revenue for the business. They also really liked that this company was backed by results. So they had a lot of great use cases before. They had a lot of great before and after ROIs. And that was a reason that social proof really helped this company to say, this is what others are doing as well. I'll give it a try. So based on, we're still in the understanding what matters portion, right? Like we're still at the very beginning. Based on everything that we outlined and what we know about this company and the situation and the goals and the audience, this is how I would interpret all of that to start taking the next steps to formulating a plan. We need to segment our buyer personas. So we have a C-level audience and we have an end user audience. A CRO's pain point for hitting the bottom line is going to be way different than an AE's pain point of making month-end quota. So the messaging needs to align correctly to the pain points and the needs of what each of them are facing in their day-to-day. We also know that with 50 or more reps, that it's definitely an enterprise audience. So we need to, make sure that we're equipped for that budget as well and buying committee as well. We also need to make sure that we showcase the easy and seamless integrations with the existing tech stack for Salesforce and Slack based on what we know that lack of adoption could be a fear, and show that how it actually boosts productivities and efficiency as well. We also need to know that sales reps and CROs, they're really good at a peer-to-peer level, right? So we should look at partnering with individuals from a peer attention grabbing messaging strategy so that we can grab their attention as somebody who's in the weeds with them, who gets it and can talk about the difference between it. We also need to talk about ROI and implementation, especially if it takes 3 or more months to really see that. We can talk about the before and after if somebody went with the option of none. We can showcase some of the customer success partnership for adoption, saying, hey, we get it. Integrating another piece of tech stack can be really, really tricky. Here's a conversation with the CRO on how we handholded them to really get this up to use case and, throughout the 3 months duration, and just get that video testimonial, right? And just use that as like the proof point if that's one of the reasons why people buy. We also definitely need to be highlighting results. This goes back to that ROI and implementation, the before and after. What are teams doing with this? We also know from our audience research that Salesforce are extremely competitive, but they also want to know what everybody else is doing in ways that they can be better, right? So how can we get others, this goes back to the peer-to-peer attention grabbing, to talk about us and say that, hey, then talk to other sales individuals and sales leaders about ways that they can be better with this too. That's a really great way to start a conversation. So nonetheless, with everything that we learned, we need to showcase the importance of this tool in a way that generates demand, in a way that captures our audience attention. So we're thinking about organic LinkedIn, we're thinking about LinkedIn ads, we're thinking about peer-to-peer communications, we're thinking about LinkedIn communities. Pavilion is a really great one for sales communities. We're talking about in-person networking events because salespeople love to travel. We're also talking about online events, podcasts. We did a survey between if sales reps like podcasts over webinars, and they chose podcasts, right? So we should choose podcasts for our marketing strategy. We also learned that the execs and the team members are not currently active on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a really strong channel just organically for sales reps and marketing folks aligned. So being able to find a way to advocate and showcase for that exec team to be on LinkedIn organically is going to help them boost their brand awareness, as well as build credibility and trust against their other competitors as well. So, that was a lot. Step 1. Going into step 2, Katie, feel free to interrupt me if there's questions going. We are getting to the channel strategies, I promise. So here is the channel spreadsheet of everything that we just found, what we learned, what we interpreted, and this is why we start from the bottom up, is now we can put together what this looks like fundamentally, on paper, and how all of this rolls together from a larger perspective. So what I actually do, I'm going to move this Zoom thing, always in the way, Zoom. Here we go. Okay. So what I actually do, and this is a lot, so we'll walk through it individually step by step. You'll see here, for example, paid social, you'll see an annual budget and a monthly budget, right? Again, these are all made up numbers. I didn't fully think through a strategy and highlight the specific one. So bear with me, a little bit on that side. But what I'll do is I'll actually start here in the highlighted portion. I'll look at, we just decided that LinkedIn ads is an appropriate strategy for this audience, for this company. What does that strategy look like? So before I go and say we need to be spending $600,000 a year on LinkedIn ads, you better show what you're going to be doing with that before you go and you ask for that kind of money. So at the very tippity top, you'll see that the total budget here is 1.1. This is what we allocated for at the very beginning when we did all that math, right? So we're just building off of one step to the other. So this budget rolls into that assumption that we have 1.1 to use. So I'll start from the individual channel strategies and I'll say, okay, what do we need on LinkedIn in order to really drive brand awareness, drive brand efficiency, build credibility and trust, and then also keep in front of the audience from a retargeting standpoint with those video testimonials that we're going to be working towards to get. Then I roll all that up individually and I put that for the monthly and the annual. And then I just have the calculation that says in general on everything that I want to do for the annual, what does that look like, right? So this goes down to if we're doing a brand and the value adds, if we have to segment our two audiences between a CRO and an AE, we probably need two different LinkedIn campaigns. So each of those needs to have enough budget in there to be successful. So that's a whole different campaign brief, channel brief, which unfortunately I skipped over for today. Just due to time, because I know there's a lot going on. But if anybody has questions or wants to see a brief, I'm happy to show you guys that. But that's just really the tactical nitty gritty of what does that actually look like? Then you roll all that in. So at a high level brand, say we're running two different campaigns, segmented, those two ways, this is the amount of money that we would need. And then, just the roll up here of going into LinkedIn and paid search, and paid and YouTube. So at a high level right now, if we look at the investment right now, we're only about $908,000, which is nowhere near close to 1.1. And the reason for that is testing, is for us to have that budget to say, hey, listen, if we wanted to test something entirely different in LinkedIn or in Google Ads or in YouTube or for a community or, to pay to get a customer to talk to us or to pay to get an influencer to work with us, we have a little bit of wiggle room on what we want to be seeing with that. So you can see the breakdown between some of this for events, the biweekly podcasts and the in-person events. These are to generate demand, which is one of the things that this company really needs to have done. For a biweekly podcast, a specific strategy that I always like using for podcasts is to identify who your ICP is. And for example, that ABM account list that we saw inside of Salesforce, let's reach out to the key decision makers and ask them to be on our podcast. Now we're getting our actual audience engaging with us. Now we're getting content that we can chop up and send to every other CRO or every other AE talking about why they need to listen, that peer-to-peer attention grabbing content. And then now also we have a weekly bi-weekly podcast that we can also just use and mold and send to anybody else that is interested in learning for those insights too. So it doesn't always have to be expensive, right? For the in-person events, so salespeople really like to network. They really like to go to in-person networking events. What if this company created a flagship product or a flagship event, say once a year, in, I don't know what month, February or August, all these people that they want to invite and just do a networking event. Doesn't always have to be something super big and fancy. And I know a lot of in the industries, people are oh, trade shows are dead or events are dead. It doesn't have to be a mass produced trade show. It can just be roadside connecting events, just different places or roadshow, it doesn't always have to be something really that extreme. But I allocated a big chunk here because getting them in person, getting them networking and getting that brand exposure is going to be very critical for generating that demand. Also, we could have a marketing person go to those and interview people on the spot. Now we get more content and video content that we can chop up and use for LinkedIn ads too. So part of this is it's also on paper, but it's also, you have to think about ways to make the specific channel strategy work. different than just the normal like marketing playbook, right? Like based on what we know about the audience, what do we need in order to get this successful? We need that peer-to-peer information and those peer-to-peer conversations. So you can see here, paid social, this is focused on both generating demand as well as converting demand and the retargeting part of it. The paid search, I always like for Google Ads just to be focused on like the actual like lead capture portion of it. So somebody who's specifically searching for the brand or searching for the solution, to kind of just pay money to maintain that so you don't lose that in market search, especially because you have higher level competitors. That's always, a conversation. Should you bid on your own brand? Should you not? It really depends, right? It's going to be nitty gritty. But, for example, one of the things that we should do for this company is to add it here. For YouTube, for paid video, I always like an explainer video. Like if you have nothing else to work with and you do have an explainer video, that one always seems good. One of the things I was actually dreaming about last night that I added last minute into this is like, hey, what if we got a CRO on a video that said if they were interested in having a coffee on them to pick their brain? Like, and we targeted that, and now you're getting a CRO to a CRO talking about business level problems, and you're just offering somebody's time. Like that's a really high quality meeting, right? So just stuff like that, the way to think about to that will resonate for this audience, as well as get us like other forms of content that we could use and produce. For Meta, so this is Facebook and Instagram, just retargeting. I always think, crossing your T's and dotting your I's is a good foundation for marketing strategy. So I never want to miss out on those retargeting opportunities. And then a big thing also is community, getting that go-to-market team inside of that community network. A lot of networks, like the demand one are free. You just have to sign up for the exclusive ones. For Pavilion, it is a paid one, right? So finding a way in the budget for the whole entire go-to-market team to be a part of that, to engage, to learn, and then to also, learn some of the educational side that Pavilion has to offer too. And then I also added here the LinkedIn organic training, getting that executive and the team active on LinkedIn. Normally that's not a really high fee unless you pay like an external consultant to come in. But if you have a really good CMO or even, a director level or VP, sometimes they can do that training on their own as well. I'll pause here for any questions before we get into the nitty gritty of the conversion rates and MQLs and SQLs and stuff.
One of the questions I've gotten a few times is it possible to get like make a copy version of these afterwards?
I have templates.
Okay, perfect.
Yes,
I've gotten that like 4 times. So can we get this?
Anything you guys see today, you can have a copy of. I actually have created templates that I've shared before, and I use those templates for this presentation. So
perfect.
it's not a hard share at all whatsoever. So yes, I'll send the actual templates to you, Katie, afterwards, if you are okay with distributing that to everybody else.
Awesome, absolutely. And then another question going back to for less tenured managers, what do you do whenever you're trying to figure out how much you should spend on each type of campaign? Where are you able to find these numbers? If you're just starting out with all of this.
Good question. Yeah. Great question. So this starts with what you actually want to achieve on the platform to begin with. So if we take paid social on LinkedIn, for example, think about the specific campaigns you want to run, how many, and what you want to slice and dice. Like if you have 2 personas, 4 personas, and make sure you're allocated enough budget for each of those campaigns. Then if you have access to your campaign manager, you can go in and you can build your audience, and you can see the percentage of how big that audience actually is in LinkedIn. There's a website on Google. I've Googled it a few times, and it'll tell you based on your audience size, your frequency for the ads, how much you should consider investing. It's a LinkedIn resource. So if you have access to your LinkedIn, like customer support or your campaign support person, they can also help advise you on like that specific one as well. I've used that before when I was in-house, that specific LinkedIn person, to say, hey, these are all the campaigns I'm wanting to run. Here's the audience sizes based on those. What do you think is going to be useful from a budget perspective? And you can work with them to get that specific number. And then you can roll that up, monthly, quarterly, annually, and you can use this big number here to say, this is how much I need for just LinkedIn. You can do the same thing for Google. Google has a forecasting tool. If you have a tool like 6 Sense, 6 Sense has a forecasting tool. So a lot of them, if you have a customer success rep, they can work with you. A lot of resources are actually available just on Google. If you Google it, a lot of people have built calculators with what you should invest. at a minimum, you can always have somebody on like a consultant side that you can run it by, whose ins and outs and their whole role is paid media, or their whole role is LinkedIn, and you can make friends with them and you can ask them like just as a pulse check, and then they can help you guide that as well. Sometimes if you're not as a senior marketer, sometimes a more senior marketer will have that insight too, if you just ask within your immediate marketing team too.
Awesome. Thank you. I always forget that
Amazing.
I'm on mute. I'm always like, oh yeah, this is awesome.
Yeah, rock on. Cool. So going back into what we need for our revenue targets, let me find my mouse, here we go. So if we look at what we wanted to get accomplished for 2023 goals, when we did the math, we figured out how many new accounts we needed, how many we're going to churn. So what we actually need to get is not 93 accounts, it's actually 100 to make up for the ones that are going to churn, right? So if we take that 100 account number, and now we say this marketing plan is going to be aligned with these ops, and say, for example, best case scenario, because this is a presentation and we're running through a lot of this because we're getting really close on time, is that we are going to drive 100 of these ops. You can go back to your guys's lead, MQL, SQL conversion rates, and you can map all that out. Be careful with that, because you'll go down through that lead gen hamster wheel where you'll see the specific conversion rates and you'll fluff the numbers more top of funnel in order to see that more bottom funnel. So that's the reason why I hid these columns, because I didn't want to go down that rabbit hole for today's conversation. Let's say, for example, that we were driving really good quality pipeline and we were able to hit this 100 targets for our accounts for our open pipeline. This company doesn't have that great of a closed won percentage. As we see from here, the last one that we took, 13 or 8%. If we just take 8%, which was 2022, so we can imagine from the year prior, it'll roll over about the same if nothing changes. What happens is we only win about 8 of those. That's not a very big percentage. So we look at pipeline predict, we have to bring in 7.5 out of the 2.1 that we are responsible for. We have to bring source 7.5 just in order to close 6, which puts us right under target. Like nowhere close to target. Like what we need to work on, from what I look at by mapping all of this out, is we have a quality issue, right? Which is what we identified up front. And we need to work on our conversion rates. So let's take the exact same plan and say that with this plan that we put in place, we're confident it's going to drive more high quality individuals. It's going to reach the right people. And we're going to be able to actually boost this conversion rate from 8% to 40%, which is the close rate that our internal KPI is for, right? Like as marketers. Now, all of a sudden, we still have the same pipeline predict because we're still going after 100 accounts, right? With that close won ratio, like now we're ahead of our pipeline target. Same investment, same strategy. All we focused on was going after the right people, doing our customer research, framing that messaging, and going on the right channels that the audience is going to be like receptive of. The math doesn't lie, right? And so you can steal these specific templates when you're talking to executives on how low quality conversion rates are affecting your overall business growth. I'll pause here for any questions as I go back to my presentation.
You are good on my side.
Cool. So in general, when we think about creating a demand gen plan that starts with understanding what matters, formulating a plan, and conquering the market, which we haven't even gotten there yet, what we want to have happen is a plan that generates demand, is a plan that converts demand, and a plan that accelerates pipeline, which is that conversion rate percentage, right? So we can easily take that ABM list that I mentioned, that account list, and use that to start with to accelerate pipeline, because that's a really great way for us to start for qualified accounts. The next big battle for this company specifically is going to be changing that measurement from SQLs to revenue. So we did all the math, we did all the forecasting, we did all the investments. We had that conversation of saying, hey, listen, if we just did the conversion rates, we could actually exceed our revenue targets. The problem is you need to hold marketing accountable to revenue and not SQLs. So we did the math, had our hard conversations. Now we're doing our ask. So it's give, ask, right? That's the way that I approach it as well. So now you can have, and steal this slide, copy and paste it, whatever you guys need for the actual wording of it. But the problem right now is that marketing is being tasked with measuring marketing channels per investment. The specific investments, LinkedIn has to deliver X MQLs, paid social has to deliver this, Google has to deliver that. And they're not thinking about the omni-channel touch points that are required, that marketing is like fundamentally in order to really get somebody interested, aware, interested, and converted, right? So now, mathematically, what we should not do is directly calculate MQLs, SQLs, and all those outputs for the sense of targets, right? It's always good. You can do that just for your own knowledge. I do that for mine with my clients, but I don't use those as a conversations of how many MQLs or how many leads do we need in order to get X opportunities? No. What we need is an opportunity investment for marketing to be responsible for revenue with that. So you can have here, marketing is both an art and a science. Like all the channels, they work together equally. They need to be measured equally, not in silo. And so here you can say turning off one base of the unattributed data leads to false assumptions and ultimately sabotages marketing budgets and efforts. It's not what you want as a brand new leader or a part of a marketing team. Is somebody higher than you coming in and saying they're going to like sabotage your marketing efforts. It's not what we want. So to switch that, to shift that, we need to say that based on the 7 million ARR goal that you told me you wanted, marketing should be held accountable for 30%. Here's a plan I put in place to help you guys achieve that and more if we just work on improving the conversion rates. It's a no-brainer conversation. Most of the sales leaders are going to be like, all right, prove it. All right, go, right? They're going to test you to see if you can own up to that. So just own up to it. We just worked all that plan in place to get you in that right percentage. So now is the fun part. We got the buy-in, we did the research, we built the plan, we got the buy-in for the money and the investment. This is when the fun happens. Hey. Now it's step 3 where we hit conquer the market. This is, there's really no big fancy like spreadsheet for you all. I'll dive into like the results side of this. But this is where you roll up the sleeves. You figured out what your LinkedIn strategy is. You figured out what your podcast strategy is. You figured out what your networking strategy is. Now you just got to go like freaking do it, right? Like you got to get your resources. You got to get your team. You got to roll up your sleeve. You got to do design. You got to do the copy. Just get it done. Just get it done at that point. This is the conquer the market. It's the most fun part, but it's will only be effective if you start from the fundamentals first, your key ingredients. So when we talk about conquering the market, this goes into the efficiency conversation that I was telling you guys about. You don't always need more money to conquer the market. So as you grow year over year, most of the time marketing budgets, they get bigger and better, right? Based on the thank you for helping to achieve the revenue targets. And while that's all good and great, more money is always great. There's always more things that marketing can do with it. Don't get me wrong. It's not always needed. So here's what we're going to talk about and why. So this is the same company, the same, revenue targets of what we were taking. I actually took 2022 because that we have like the close one data for. 2023 is still this active year. Our target is 7 million. We're not there yet, so we can't really reverse engineer what was done prior. So let's look at what this is from 2022. Normally from an investment, right? And sales investment, if you take salaries, tech, and all that, sales is normally about 2 times of marketing, let's be real. And then from there, we can reverse engineer. This is the same numbers that you saw from the number of customers that were acquired. If we just do the average right here, you guys can see it, 19, I'm not making these numbers up. How long they stay, this is just what we learned based on churn and the churn rate, right? The average contract value is at 75K. So if we divide that by the monthly, we can do the calculations for what that CAC actually is. And you guys can see here, and you can steal the spreadsheet too. I'll share it afterwards, but you can see the formula right here for the CAC. You can see the formula right here for the LTV. Now, if we look at the CAC to LTV ratio, so 1.2 ratio, not terrible, not extremely profitable. It's something to inherit. Is what I like to say. ROI is about 800K, right? If nothing else changes for 2023, but we boosted our conversion rate, as we talked about, from 8% to 40%, and our average contract value increased by 15% because we drove highly qualified people. Nothing else changes. We went from an average of 19 to 27. We went from the average contract value of 75 to 86. We went from our CAC lowered from 216 to 152. Our LTV lowered a little bit, nothing really to worry about too much, about the same. The CAC to LTV ratio is 1.7 to 1.2. That's better. It's on the improvement side. For ROI, now we went from 129 to now 2.8. What?
Hey, question for you, Janelle. Karina
Yeah.
was asking, how do you calculate the 30% marketing sourced only when CRM show multi-touch attribution showing sales, partners, and marketing influence revenue?
Say that again.
How do you calculate 30% marketing sourced only when CRM shows multi-touch attribution showing sales, partners, and marketing influenced revenue?
Oh, the problem here is that you don't have marketing sourced. So as part of the operations for measurement is, a really great question, is you need to figure out how you're going to report. And this goes back to understanding what matters, resources, and getting that tech stack up to speed with how you want to get reported on. If you're going to promise that you're going to deliver 30% of revenue, you better find a way to show that to work. And if you don't have that currently right now set up, you need to find that up in the very beginning of your steps before you get too far deep into this plan. That's a really great point, especially those like if you're switching from a low intent lead gen model or MQL model and you're wanting to switch to something that's more revenue driven. The biggest mistake that I see with my clients is that they don't change how marketing is measured. And they currently keep MQLs being tagged as content downloads or lead scoring thresholds that are just creating noise and buzz, and your dashboards are going all over the place. Operationally, you should consider that first. Change how you want to measure your MQLs, how you want to measure marketing for revenue, get that tagging and reporting set up so that when we hit that conquer the market stage, all we're doing is we're fueling that data, we're fueling those dashboards. So great question. I would say from the get-go, you need to find a way to measure that and measure that successfully.
Great, thank you.
Amazing. Yeah, great question. Great question. So here, compounding that over in the next year, say we hit 2023 revenue targets, and now with the actual same marketing investment, it never changed over the last couple of years. We went from a CAC of 1.2 to 2.4 with a 5.6 investment over 129. It's not always the same plan, same investment, same everything. All we did was increase the ratios and put an actual revenue generating plan in place. We changed the channel strategies. We did our customer research. We did our market research. We did our ingredient checklist, right? And the portion sizes and servings. And now it's the fun part. We conquer the market and we do the fun. So coming back into this presentation, all this sounds good and great, right? Like the CAC to LTV ratio, you can see it theoretically with the numbers, the forecasted results and whatnot. But me personally, this is what I love to do for a living. This is what I help do with my clients. And this is the part where I am under some NDA. So you'll see some things like blacked out, but not all of this is just necessarily saying that it's theoretical or that it could be. It's like you could actually have it too. So you can see here over the last couple of months, number of MQLs from a low intent model to a high intent model. Those are high intent MQLs, quality, not just lead gen. The disqualification rate, we went from 86% to 38% in the span of 6 months. It does take time, right? But doesn't mean that it's not there. MQLs by stage, just as opportunity. Look at the little yellow portion or orange or whatever color this is. It's close lost. We went all the way from this percentage down to here. Doesn't always mean that you need more MQLs to hit pipeline. What you need is you need to decrease or increase the quality and decrease the ones that are not of quality. Close one revenue over a span of 5 months. Open pipeline. That's incredible. It's not always just art and a science. Sometimes is you just have to reverse engineer and work with the cards that you're dealt to figure out what works specifically. So that's the master class. I hope you guys took notes. Now it's questions.
I took so many notes, and we've had so many interesting comments too, and Kate's made some really good points about how there needs to be so much alignment. The best people come with marketing, partners, sales, influencers, and that whole alignment and conversation. I'm kind of curious when it comes to that alignment, so often our teams are really siloed. What are maybe like 1 or 2 best practices that you always recommend for folks to really build an alignment with their teams?
Yeah. So from the jump, actually, and this is going to be controversial, so take it or leave it, but I always like to do my interviews, as I mentioned, with marketing, sales, customer success, and specific customers. I buddy with my sales leaders and my sales teams, because marketing plus sales equals power couple. power couple, period, right? Like you need all go to market alignment, you need everything, but period. Marketing and sales, no brainer. So what I do is in that interview process, I ask them what some of their frustrations have been with marketing and what are the things that they feel that they need that marketing could produce to help them do their job better. And I prioritize getting that done. And I say, hey, I'm not just here to talk the talk. I'm here to walk the walk with you, right? And you establish right out the gate that partnership, that alignment, and that relationship. And I really like when I create my marketing plays. So sometimes marketing can do both marketing emails and they can create sales's outreach emails as well, like as templates. If you're a team that does that too, find a leader, run that through them first, get their feedback, have them mark it up. It's a learning lesson for you, but it's also an alignment driving exercise. And you can say, hey, I value your opinion because you're the ones that actually are the ones that are prospecting, right? Like you probably know what word will work better here or there, or if you want to do a 15-minute coffee chat or a 40-minute coffee chat or whatever number, that you guys have tested that works better. Like I trust your opinion, and have them make their edits and use them and just enable them to still feel like they're good at their job, but then just run things by them, get their brain and use it.
Yeah, I love that. And for those of you who joined our session with Camila I think last week, 2 weeks ago, we had talked a lot about this as before we get into boardroom meetings of making sure, are we all on the same page? So easily, or so often we are all just running full steam ahead and don't even think to stop and talk to our counterparts. And so oh my gosh, you're absolutely amazing. This was so incredibly spot on. If anyone has other questions, what is the best way for them to get a hold of you?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn, send me a DM, connect with me, follow me. I don't really care if you want to reach out to my personal email. It's I'm sorry, what is my email? Janelle at elevate-growth.com. And then, I got a podcast, I got a website. I don't want to do too much self-promotion here, but if you want to reach out, you can send me a DM on LinkedIn or you can send me a personal email.
Awesome. That sounds great. I just dropped Janelle's LinkedIn link in the chats. Go connect with her. You always ask her, you're always welcome to ask her a question in the community too. So don't hesitate. But wow, this was amazing. I am completely blown away. Once I get all the copies from you, I'll get the recording, everything put up, and I'll put it in the events channel as well, follow up. But thank you so much. I mean, this was just outstanding, and I'm so excited to dive into this with our own team. So thank you. And
amazing.
I hope everyone has a great rest of your day.
Thank you so much. Thank you everybody for attending.
Thanks. Bye. Y'all have a good one.